Well, despite January's chilly temperatures, consumer spending did heat up. Bank of America noting a 1.9% year-over-year increase in spending per household on credit and debit cards. Joining us right now is Liz Everett Krisberg. She's the head of the Bank of America Institute. And Liz, that's actually pretty impressive given the strong growth that we saw in spending in December and that holiday shopping overall. Some of the data we've seen from the government has shown that spending actually eased off a little bit after that.
Yeah, so the headline number, as you said, was up 1.9%, which was down a little bit from December, which was 2.2, but it's still 3 times greater than the average we saw, the average monthly gain we saw throughout 2024. So the consumer is still spending. Now, what I will point out, though, is if you look at the month-over-month comparison, that did come down 0.4, but some of that had to do with the weather. I mean, there was a weather story. Actually, there were multiple weather stories in January that impacted pretty much every region in the country. You know, in Florida and Georgia in the South, they had snow and ice. That doesn't typically happen. Obviously, the wildfires out in LA, but the Northeast and the Midwest had the polar vortex, right, with low temperatures. And so if you think about the impact, and we look at the category spending, we do see what would be typical to weather disruption. So, for example, when we look at services spending was flat on the month, but restaurants down 1.4%. You don't go outside when it's icy. You don't go outside when it's cold. On the flip side, on the retail spending, groceries continued to increase. General merchandise continued to increase. And again, some of that
clothing was down a lot.
Clothing was down a huge amount,
8%.
But it really offset what it was up in December. So I think as you think about this, again, those categories make sense when we think about the weather impact, but there may be some other things going on. For example, in groceries, you know, how many times have we talked about egg inflation?
Right.
Right? I mean, I know a college hockey player who called up mom and dad and said, eggs are getting really expensive. When you come to watch my game, can you please bring me some eggs? And sure enough, I saw her after the game walking into the locker room with a couple dozen eggs. People, you know, are talking about inflation. The question is, should we be worried about it? And
should we?
My answer is not yet. And I'll tell you why. I know I say this all the time. If you want to understand spending, you have to understand the labor market. And what our data is telling us is that after-tax wages and salaries continue to go up for every group. And they're going up the most for younger consumers. Gen Z is up 8%, millennials up 6%. And so, you know, taking another step back, not talking about groceries, but a bigger component of what consumers spend on, your monthly auto payment. Monthly auto payments are going up 5%, according to our data. And actually, this is interesting. Not only are they going up, 20% of households now spend more than $1,000 on their monthly car payment. That is double the percentage from 5 years ago. But the ratio of a car payment to your income
has gone down.
Is stable and going down.
Okay.
So if the incomes are going up, you can offset the, you know, at this point, something to watch. But right now, I think that's what's supporting the spending.
Eggs, you don't put eggs in your car, so.
Well, other than maybe on Halloween.
Except maybe
other people's cars.
But we've seen this movie before with eggs. I mean, cow main became famous whenever bird flu. I think the Biden administration killed 200 million live chickens.
Yeah.
And you have to do it. You don't want bird flu. And you can do, I don't know, you can substitute something, I think, for right now. Oil. $100 oil, then you should worry, I think, because it just filters down the supply chain into everything.
And I think you're right. I think we're hearing a lot about eggs. We'll understand what's really happening with inflation tomorrow, right? But again, the thing that I keep looking at in our data that makes me think this is benign right now is that ratio relative to income growth.
Right.
And if the consumer can stomach it and continue, and by the way, they're not really eating into their savings. It's coming down a little bit, as you would expect seasonally.
Right.
But their balance sheets are continuing to look okay. We saw an increase in what people are contributing to their 401ks, so they're prioritizing savings.
6.6% versus 6.5%.
So again, the consumer's doing okay, and actually more than okay, pretty solid.
I mean, that's the biggest takeaway. The reason we want you here is to tell us when you're seeing a change in how the consumer is behaving, how they seem to be feeling about things, what they're taking from the wages. You say it's all clear right now.
I'm saying it's all clear right now.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that, this is going to be the way it is forever. But we look at the data. I mean, this is why we talk about it, to see what is actually happening. And it's okay right now.
When's the last time you saw a move in the consumer that really kind of surprised you and made you think, okay, hold out?
I think as long as we've had the Bank of America Institute for the last 3 years.
I don't remember you ever.
I've been surprised the whole time that the consumer has continued to be as robust as it has. So I would say I'm surprised every month, because if you look at the headlines tell you doom and gloom, but that's not really what our data is showing us.
That's great.